What's up, guys? Justin here. Today I'm going to be starting a new discussion topic I like to call starter versus starter. In this topic, we'll be discussing the two best potential starters for different decks or different subclans, whatever you want to call it. And today I figured, where's a better place to start than a deck I've been having a lot of fun with, and it's topping everywhere, Revengers. And in this topic, we'll of course discuss the attributes of each starter, and I'll just break it down into three categories: early game, late game, and basic synergy with the deck. And then at the end, I'll tell you which one I believe is best, and feel free in the comments down below to tell me what you think. Because I'm in no way the end-all be-all of knowledge, not even close. But let's start with Dark Goat for early game. As y'all can see here, Goat is a 4K while Cloddus is a 5K. And this may not seem like a lot, but as people that have been playing Vanguard for a while know, that extra 1,000 makes all the difference. And you have to look around and see what all the other prevalent deck builds are. And right now, everything turn 1 and turn 2 is going to be riding a 7 or a 9K. At least. Not many people, almost no decks run 8K vanillas anymore. And if they do, they don't want to ride them. And very few decks run 10K vanillas anymore, just because of all the subclans, and they would rather run a 9K with an effect versus a 10K. So, what difference does that make? Well, that being said, you're most likely going to be riding a 7 and a 9 on your turn 1 and turn 2 also. That means for Cloddus behind a 7 or a 9, and your opponent's on a 7 or a 9, they can drop a 10K for a 1 pass. So if you get a trigger, you break through. If it's a crit, 2 damage. And with Goat, they can drop a 10. That 10K shield all of a sudden is a no pass. So any triggers you get are useless unless you have a rear guard to put it on. That being said, they can just drop a 5K for a 1 pass, and who cares? They just threw away a draw trigger, whatever, even if you break through. Oh well, they didn't waste that much. And in this build, specifically, if y'all see my deck profile, you know I preach 12 crit Revengers. I believe it's the best trigger lineup for it right now, because draws really don't work in the deck, because it needs to be a super aggressive deck, so it's going to have its rear guards on the field, and you need the high shield count in your hand to guard for your rear guards. And draw triggers don't always go off. If you get a draw trigger on the drive check, unless you draw a Raging Form off of it, you're going to wish it was a crit or a heal. If you get on a damage check, great, but that's not going to happen all so often if you're only running 4 draws. 6 draw, yeah, but in Revengers, you're going to deck out if you run 6 draw. Trust me, I tried it a lot. So I'd have to say, overall, early game, I'd have to give the point to Cloddus. Because, like I said, you got to make those crits matter. You got to hit those columns early game and just apply pressure and rush your opponent and make sure that when you do get Raging Form's effect off late game, that it really matters. You want them to already be at 4 or 5 damage, and you really want to push. That being said, let's move on to late game. So late game, your starters generally, unless you're just going to keep it in the back to be a booster, it's generally useless. So at that point, you start looking further into their effects, how they can help you in the late game. Cloddus' effect says you counterblast 1, put him in the soul, search the deck for a Blaster Dark Revenger, and call it to rear guard. This is a very good combo, especially in Raging Form, where you want to drop a 7K behind Raging Form and use Raging Form's effect to make it at a 21K column even before you activate Raging Form's Limit Break. And that can lead to winning games right there. Also, Claudus' brother Dorant is an amazing card in the deck. That exists. So, virtually, Claudus' skill, he replaces himself, and as long as you call that Blaster Dark Revenger in front of a Dorant, it becomes free. So he's just a free switch out. It's, you trade a booster for an attacker. That's really good. You're always going to get something for it, and there's just no drawbacks. Also, Raging Form's skill says you have to in order to activate it, you have to retire 3 cards with Revenger in their name in order to Superior Persona Ride from your hand. Claudus is Revenger and Dark Goat is not. Dark Goat's back there still and you have no use for activating Dark Goat's skill. You find yourself in a situation where you have to retire Dark Goat and call something else there instead, just to be able to use your Raging Form skill. Whereas Claudus, if he's fine back there and you just want to sack him off for a Raging Form Dragon, you can, with no drawbacks, and it really doesn't matter. He's just a really good generic toolbox card, which basically is what Revengers is all about. It's about managing your resources well, just as in any Vanguard deck, but you can turn your resource virtually into any other resource you need. You need a booster, that's fine, leave it as a booster. You need an attacker instead, okay, go grab your attacker. That's what the entire deck's based around. All the way from the Claudus to your Tartu grabbing you whatever grade 1 you need, to your Mordred Phantom Break Ride grabbing you any grade 2 or lower from the deck you need. So, where does Dark Goat fit into the late game? With as much as I said Dark Goat is not as good as Claudus early game, that's not true here at all. Where Claudus can be a grade 2 if you need it to, it can be retiring fodder if you need it to. Dark Goat can't do that. It can essentially turn itself into a grade 3 by counterblasting 1, moving it into the soul, and searching the top 5. Then you can add any grade 3 Shadow Paladin from those top 5 cards to your hand. This is a very good skill in a Raging Form deck, whereas you have that extra opportunity to grab the second Raging Form from your deck in order to get his limit break off. The bad part is, if you don't have the Counterblast to spare in this Counterblast heavy deck, that skill is completely dead. Whereas Claudus' Counterblast can be nullified by calling the Blaster Dark Revenger, in front of Dorant and unflipping that damage. Dark Goat essentially can't do that himself. So you do have to use a Counterblast here, whereas this Counterblast can get reimbursed to you, like, immediately. Also, if your hand already has several 3s, you don't need that 3. And whereas Claudus can just stay on the field and be retiring fodder, Dark Goat cannot. You would have to call something else there if you can't activate his skill to get rid of him. That being said, like I said before that, Dark Goat still is just as live as Claudus late game, simply for the fact that he can grab you that Raging Form. So that, whereas he has all these negatives that Claudus does better, all these things against him not being a Revenger, only being a 4K, the skill, the Counterblast 1 and check the top 5 for a Raging Form in a deck where you need that second Raging Form in hand really makes up for it. That's why a lot of people run him instead. So they kind of both have their merits, but I would still have to say, in a game of chance and where you never know what you're going to need, I'd say consistency is still the best way to go, and that Claudus would still have to be my pick here for late game. So that being said, and we get into the synergy of the deck, we've already touched on this with everything, with how the deck runs, really whether you're running 12 crit or not. In a Revenger deck, you're wanting to push your opponent more and more, so Claudus' 5k just synergizes with the rest of the build a lot better than Dark Goat's 4k. The only thing Dark Goat makes a column behind in this deck is a grade 2 Masquerade on Rearguard. It can make a 16k column. or behind a Vanguard Mordred Phantom where it can make a 17. Behind anything else in the deck, it's just a dead 15 or less. So it just really falls short. Whereas Claudus, no matter where you put it, it can make a column with anything except for a Blaster Dark Revenger or a Tartu. So, whereas Dark Goat can grab you that extra Raging Form, but past that, he really just doesn't do anything else for the deck, and you can really find yourself wishing he was something else, and you'll just notice he's in the way a lot. So overall, guys, I'd have to say my pick for the best Revenger starter would have to be Claudus. You can argue this, and I can see both points where Dark Goat's a really good card, and Raging Form decks running either or and some running both have been topping. But overall, take it for everything it's worth. My opinion, Claudus is the best starter. So that's it for this video, guys. Our next discussion video, we're going to keep this segment going. I'm not sure which clan we're going to do next, but hopefully we can branch it out on this little bit, and then we'll get past the starters and do maybe grade 3s, grade 1s, whatever. And I just want to get some more discussion videos out there, and I want to hear your opinions on the subject and what you guys think, because, you know, I like hearing what everybody else has to say, because you can always learn something from somebody else, and you see better from if somebody else tells you, well, I look at it from my point of view. So, but that's it for now, guys. This is Justin for Team Shenanigans, signing out.